Today we talk about growing your own food. I'm Sumayyah Simone, and you're watching What's Your View? One of the good things I noticed about living in tumultuous times is that it's becoming easier to know what's important. One of those very important things is growing your own food. Today's topic: what are you doing now to prepare your soil for the new year? And yes, I'm talking to everyone, even if it's winter where you are. Growing your own food is a year round sport. I welcome Master Farmer Bryan Ibrafall Wright. Hello, and I'd like to welcome a special guest with me today, Bryan Ibrafall Wright. Now, I'm going to read you his bio because he is a very wise and knowledgeable farmer. Bryan Ibrafall Wright is the president and founder of the Black Urban Gardening Society, also known as BUGS. His work with BUGS includes managing a global web based group of Black gardeners and farmers, assisting other organizations in establishing sustainable food systems, heritage seed and plant preservation, founding and developing the annual Holiday International Black Gardeners Day, and consulting on sustainable farm and urban planning designs and installations. While completing his undergraduate studies at Austin Peay State University, Ibrafall spent extensive time in West Africa studying the historical, social, political, and the cultural dynamics of Senegambian societies. Ooh. His studies with traditional healers and growers serve as the foundation for his current holistic, African centered, ecological approach towards community based, sustainable food systems. He has devoted numerous years of study and practice into the science and implementation of sustainable agricultural designs that are geared towards eradicating food insecurity while fostering a greater sense of community self reliance. He uses gardening as a tool for advocacy and has taught hundreds of inner city youth how to interact with their community and environment, both socially and ecologically. Ibrafall was raised in Milan, Tennessee, a community rich with culture, love, and gardens. The elders in his community taught him the virtues of growing, harvesting, sharing, and preserving your own food. Ibrafall currently lives in Oklahoma with his wife of 19 years. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Um, Wow, that's quite the resume. And the Senegambian ecological structure. Oh, we're gonna have a really nice conversation.
Cool, cool, cool. It's interesting uh listening to non-Southerners pronounce the town in which I grew up in. You pronounce it absolutely correct. It is Milan. But with our Southern accent, we call it Milan.
Oh,
Uh
really?
yeah, so it's interesting whenever it's absolutely pronounced Milan. Uh
Okay,
but yeah, we
okay.
call it Milan. But yeah,
Mylan.
Milan.
Well, I should call it
Yes,
Mylan too, since it's in the South. You
yeah,
guys have to get it
yeah.
right.
We need to no, we need to get it right. It's Milan, definitely.
So,
Yeah.
I know your background is
Mhm.
was guard like you grew up on a farm, right?
Yeah, I grew up in agriculture. I grew up around agriculture. Um, Pretty much so the little town I grew up in, Milan. Um, you know, agriculture, that's the basis of the, you know, of most of the income there in the community. Um, Everybody had, extensive gardens, farms. Milan was actually, I like to say it now because it's very interesting. Because as a kid, I had no idea, but Milan was actually the no-till capital of the world. And
Hmm.
when you speak of no-till, to imagine growing up in this little town in Tennessee, and once a year we have a no-till festival, and you see people from Japan and from Australia and from all over the world sort of flocking into this little town. And for me, I had no idea, the importance of no-till agriculture and sustainable agriculture, but it by and large was just a practice that, everybody sort of incorporated. And now for us to, move forward 15, 20, 30 years now we see that as it relates to sustainable agriculture, whether it be in farming or even just in the backyard garden, no till is sort of the standard for agriculture now. And so, looking at that and that sort of that history. Yes, like, sometimes I think you're immersed in stuff, and because you're there, you don't really see it. It took
Right,
me to
right.
leave and to actually look at it to say, wow, uh, I've been heavily immersed in these fields of agriculture, my whole life. My whole life, yes.
Wow. Now, what is? Let's back up for one quick second. What is no-till for the people that may
Right.
not know?
So no-till agriculture is a form of agriculture that, from the most simplistic viewpoint, is what it sounds like. No tilling. So
Mhm.
you try not to till the soil. Now, the benefit of not tilling the soil, and quite often, whenever we think of a garden, and so many people I work with who don't have a garden, the first thing they think of is, I need to buy a tiller. The problem with tilling the soil is that the soil um, is a whole ecological system. We see that, researchers are constantly discovering more, but per every 1 inch of soil, there are trillions of microbial beings. And the specificity of these microbial beings in the region, in the soil in which they live, they are specialists for their region. There are microbes that sit at the top of the soil whose sole design is to break down organic matter, whether it be leaves or mushrooms, or any decaying matter. That's their objective, is to break that down. And below those microbes, there are microbes that are designed to move this organic matter into another form, to break apart, the structure of it, to where it could separate, the carbon from it, or it could separate the iron or these other elements of it. So when you till your soil, what you do is flip up this whole ecosystem. So it's, imagine someone coming to your house and flipping it upside down and wondering if you could function the way that you have been uh been set up to function. You couldn't do
Mhm.
it. And so when we flip the soil and we till the soil, we flip the whole ecological system of the soil. Uh, and basically we kill the microbes, and so they have to reestablish themselves in the order in which they're supposed to establish themselves. So what we see now is that when we do not till the soil, we save the microbial life. But also what happens is that when you don't till the soil, the organic matter that's on top of the soil a lot of time is not removed, and so it just sits there on top of the soil. Is it the picture perfect garden that we grew up with looking at Little House on a Prairie, where you can see the straight lines and rows? No, it doesn't look that way. It looks like a forest. It looks like a forest. You have organic matter on top of the soil that breaks down, that holds nutrients, that holds water, moisture. And so really going back into the way, um, you know, the way that things are supposed to be. I always think about, when I speak of, this sort of sustainable agriculture system, is just, that a con. concept of Sankofa. It really is just going back to the ways of your ancestors. And so, your ancestors didn't necessarily have all of this equipment to till the land and to make it look pristine. And so they realized that the matter that was there was beneficial. And so no-till
Wow.
agriculture is just a system of growing to where we're not tilling the soil and we are constantly recycling the organic matter that came from the earth to build to take it right back to it.
Wow, that I thought I knew what no-till was. I didn't like you gave it a whole new meaning to me now.
Hmm.
I mean, because I didn't realize that the very top layer had microbes um that were beneficial and important to the soil. I thought it was I had a whole different idea,
Yeah,
honestly.
each layer of the soil, if you look at it sort of like a lasagna, um, each layer serves a purpose, and it's akin to, all aspects of life. You know, each phase that we go through in life, it has a beneficial purpose. And we just have to be conscientious of it to utilize it, for our future growth. And so when we look at the soil, it's the same concept. That first layer of the soil, that's generally where nematodes and other organisms like earthworms and, these other, sort of organisms that we can see, they
Mhm.
live and they function and they thrive in that area. They're breaking down grass and leaves and other dead, decaying matter. We see the fungus in trees and, especially when you walk through a forest, and that fungus has a specialized purpose. It's to take this tree that has lived for hundreds of years in this very hard being, and it's to break it down to where it could be recycled again and again. Humans, I think, due to our lack of connection with the earth, we often fail to realize that, there is no more carbon being created.
Hmm.
There's
Really?
no more water being created. The same water that we drank has went through the same water cycles that the water from a Tyrannosaurus Rex drunk. It's the same
Wow.
water. It's the
That's a
same matter.
fascinating thought.
Yes, and so our ancestors knew to, I mean, and due to they had the blessing of a lot of times not having all of this technology, and the blessing in that is when you don't have a lot of options, you have to work with what you got. And so they realized how to maximize what they had. And so they composted, they took the manure from their animals and from all of this stuff, and they learned how to convert all of this into organic matter, and so, yeah, everything that we do, literally everything that we do in life, particularly as it relates to nature, it has a very specialized purpose. And a lot of times, just to our ignorance, we go and we do what we've seen people do. And unfortunately, a lot of times we copy people who have no historical, you can't see any historical um, perspective of them being sustainable. And so we just copy sort of what we see people do,
Mhm.
and we replicate the same cycle. And what we're seeing is that we have a earth that is dying, that is quickly dying. And
Mhm.
the most revolutionary thing we could do to save our earth is to create soil. And we look at greenhouse emissions. A third of the greenhouse emissions in the world stem from agriculture. We look at deforestation. The majority of the forests are being, we look at the Amazon as being cut down. The Amazon is becoming a desert. We know it as the Amazon rainforest, but it's becoming a desert, and it's being cut down at this rapid rate solely to for agriculture and production to grow
Yeah.
soy, and to grow soybeans to
To grow
feed cows.
soy?
Yes, to grow soybeans. It's being cut down to grow soybeans, and these huge, large acres of soybeans are being raised just to feed cows because of the Western spread of the need to eat beef. And so we look at,
So when you say that
Mhm.
though, Didn't people always eat beef? How has
People have
beef eating changed?
yeah, I mean, we could see that people have always there's a we could see that there's history of people eating beef, particularly as it relates in Africa, East Africa. We know the Maasai and many other indigenous people in East Africa. They raise cattle. A
Hmm.
lot of times they would eat the meat, but a lot of times they utilize the milk as a food source, the blood as a food source. Um, but our ancestors used cattle in the same way that we would see how many of us, our ancestors here, the Native Americans, we could see that they herded buffalo. These
Hmm.
huge herds of cattle, these huge herds of buffalo or wildebeest, once again, they served the ecological niche. They would go to a grassland, eat up all of the grass, but in the process of eating up all of this grass, what were they doing? They were stomping on the grass, they were mixing up the soil, they were urinating, they were defecating. And by the time they left this grassland, from all of the grass seeds that they ate that did not break down in their gut, they are reseeding this savanna area. Uh,
Hmm.
they are aerating the soil, and all of this happens. And then follows right behind them what follows right behind them, once they leave an area, the next thing you know, tons of birds come. Because if anybody's been around animals and you've seen cow manure, horse manure, any manure, what soon as it hits the ground, especially in warm seasons, you can't wait 5 or 6 seconds before a fly comes and it lays an egg inside of that manure. The birds know that once these larger animals leave, these hoof-footed animals leave, cows, buffaloes, whatever, that once they leave a few days after the flies lay all of their eggs on this manure, that the larvae is going to hatch. And so they come a few days later, and when birds come, what do? They come scratching. They come scratching the manure to eat the larvae from the flies or from the beetles or whatever insects have laid their larvae in there. And when the birds come scratching, they're spreading the manure. So they're essentially spreading the fertilizer all over the place. And
Oh,
so
wow.
and so when we look at it, this is like a cycle that occurs every year on a seasonal basis. So what our ancestors did, they had huge herds of cattle, but they used their cattle in that traditional sense to preserve native grasslands, and to preserve native forest areas, not in the way that we see it now. Cattle, forests are just being cut down for the sake of growing cattle. Cattle are not even eating grass. Cattle is being fed soybeans and corn. You see
Mm.
these huge feed lots to where all this cattle is just being, you know, centered to this one area. There is tons and tons and tons of toxic waste uh, that has to be dispersed. In a traditional setting, in a sustainable setting, what we see is that this cattle was grazed through hundreds and hundreds of acres of land, and in the grazing process, they were restoring the land. They were
Mm.
refertilizing the land. They were remineralizing the land. They were aerating the land. And all life forms, from the predatory animals that fed on whatever their livestock may be, it benefited. And imagine a lion, uh, eating a wildebeest or eating a cow. Not only does it eat the flesh, but when that cow decomposes, there's a whole community of beings that are designed, like we spoke earlier, to assist in that decomposition process. And all of the life that being was made out of, guess what? Recycles right back into the soil.
So the problem isn't really eating beef. The problem is how it's being done, like how
Yes.
the beef is being grown. Um, so basically, it should be local sustainable farms doing it.
Yes, it should be local sustainable farms growing food. And I strongly, encourage people, particularly your listeners, to look at all food as much as you can locally and sustainably, that's
Mhm.
grown locally and sustainably. What we see is that with urban agriculture and small scale agriculture, there's most small scale farmers have a need to grow organically. They have a need to practice sustainable methods. For them, it's just more economically efficient for them to do it. There's no need to buy a $200,000 tractor to farm 5 acres of land. So
Really? So
no,
if you were farming 5 acres of land, you wouldn't need a tractor the way you would
no,
do it?
no, no. The farm that I manage now, it's in West Baltimore. It's only an acre and a half of land. Um, but we do not use a tiller, a track. We may use a tractor to haul wood chips, uh, but we don't use a tractor at all. And the model of agriculture that we practice could easily be replicated over hundreds and hundreds of acres, and there would still be no need for a tractor, no need for a tiller, none of that.
Wow. Wow. Well, guys, didn't I tell you he was special? Like seriously, because I think most of us think about farming, we think about tractors and
Right,
tilling and all
right.
of this stuff. Where you grew up sounds like paradise to me. Like I want, how do we reproduce that? You know, like now,
Yeah.
like because I think we need to go back
Hmm.
to the way things were.
Yeah. Where I grew up at was, a very beautiful place. It's changed so much. You know, Unfortunately, a lot of these traditions of that generation, um, we don't see being passed on. Um, and when it is passed on, it's passed on, from a very romanticized perspective. Um, I think one of the things that we spoke about was the need for knowing the cycles. So, for instance, we have so many people who grow food and garden, which is a great thing, but they only garden in the spring and the summer.
Right.
And I think it's great, but I think our food security and our ability to be sustainable shouldn't be a hobby. I think it should be a way of life. I think it
Right.
should be a consistent practice that we engage in. And because when we engage in this practice, what it does is leads to more sustainable practices that you have to do. Even if you are the gardener who just grows in the summer and you're excited and it's your first year gardening and you plant the whole pack of squash seeds, and you look in your backyard and you can see nothing but squash plants, and you quickly realize that for your family of 4 people you only needed 2 plants and you have 50, and you've exhausted all of your neighbors, your friends, and everybody else who's going to take this squash. You are stuck with the option of pulling up the plants, throwing what you have away, or preserving it.
Hmm.
So if you have all of this excess produce, a lot of people, that leads them to learning how to preserve their food. And once they become proficient at, food preservation and storage, generally the next thing that comes is somebody comes up with a business model, because people like, oh, this is awesome. I like to buy this. So,
Hmm.
business stems from that. And, once the business stems from it, people begin to trade and do all of these other things with each other. And it becomes sort of a socio-economic model that's being replicated, that all just stem from your getting in your backyard or your front yard or wherever and just planting some seeds. So what we quickly understand is that agriculture is the basis for building society. That is where all society has been built from. I love to say, if oppressed communities, and particularly when we look at, like, the global African community of Black people, I always say if we could master food and family, we will be free. um,
Hmm.
and just those two institutions are so powerful that it will revolutionize our society. But moreover, it'll preserve the earth for future generations. So when we say how can we get back to that, it's like saying how do we get back to Black Wall Street? For many years, you know, and we see the popularity and the conversation happening around Black Wall Street, and we fail to realize that Black Wall Street was just a marketplace. It was just a
Hmm.
marketplace. It was just a
Mhm.
marketplace.
Mhm.
But what made Black Wall Street what it was the fact that we had all of these Black families around the area of Oklahoma and Arkansas and Kansas and Texas. They were producing, materializing products from the soil, and that was the marketplace to sell it at. So it's essential for us to get back to the soil. It's essential for us to learn how to grow our food, how to preserve our food, how to preserve our earth. Let's really work to give our children an inheritance of soil. And I say that a lot of times people sort of look at it like it's crazy, but soil is the most important thing we have here on this earth. Soil deals with our water cycle, soil regulates our weather, soil regulates our health. So soil, for us to build soil is a very revolutionary thing. And and what we see is that that act alone can change our earth.
Wow. So now, and what you said something a minute ago that inspired this show, and that was you shouldn't be gardening just in the springtime,
Right, right.
right? Like
Yeah.
that, even the preparation of the soil that is so important. And when you say all of these things that the soil regulates, I'm
Mhm,
thinking, dang, I grew up in New York City. New York City, I barely saw soil.
mhm,
You know what I mean? It was very
mhm.
little of it around, and it's doing all that. Like it's really important. So right now, we're in December, and in a
Yeah.
lot of places it's cold, and people
Mhm.
aren't thinking about gardening right now. Most
Right.
people aren't, right? We're kind of taught to think about that in the spring, right?
Yes.
But I know in my past gardening seasons, I've struggled, and I'll be like, why am I struggling with this? Why won't
Mhm,
this grow? I know it can grow,
mhm.
but I'm not thinking about gardening in December,
Right.
right? And I'm
Mhm.
willing to bet that's where I'm going wrong.
Yes, yes, I would probably say that's what's going on. I think if we looked at gardening from the viewpoint of not growing plants, but from growing soil, um, that's a whole different, philosophical thrust as it
Oh
relates to
yeah.
growing. So if we look at saying we're not going to say we're trying to grow plants, I will tell everybody plants have a natural genetic predisposition and need to survive. You don't have to really so much worry about growing your plants. What you have to worry about is creating an atmosphere that is conducive for plants to grow. And that atmosphere is the soil. So, this time of the year, even if you don't have any crops growing, there are some very strategic things that you should be doing to building the soil. And we can get into those. Some are a little bit more complicated, but some are just very simple things that you could do, and opportunities that you have to take advantage of um, to build your soil. So once you put those seeds in the ground, you're going to put them into an environment that's just full of nutrition, full of the microbial life that they need just to grow and to thrive.
That makes so much sense.
Hmm.
So tell us, like, what are some of the things? Start simple, and then we can get a little more
Yeah.
complicated for those who
Let's
want
start
to really
simple.
get
Yeah.
their hands dirty.
Yeah, yeah. Simple. This time of the year, particularly in North America, uh, what we see is everybody, your neighbors, everybody is cleaning their lawns, and what are they putting on the side of the road? Leaves.
Mm-hmm.
Leaves are an amazing thing for you to utilize as a mulch. Remember, with your garden, you want to try to keep your soil covered. You don't really want to have bare soil. You want to have a layer of mulch because remember, this mulch feeds the microbial life in the soil. And so, for me to, I guess, to try to quickly do this, if if any of your listeners have lived in any part of the world, there's some concept of trees dropping leaves. Um, it may not necessarily be correlated with fall, the fall season, or when leaves fall, hence fall. But but trees drop their leaves, and what happens here is, particularly in North America, the seasons get ready to change, and the first thing trees do upon the change of this season is that they mine minerals from the soil. Uh, My Black Health, your channel and your organization, all of this stuff, we realize that as it relates to health and particularly minerals, which are vitally important, that minerals don't come from the sun. Plants don't produce minerals. Minerals come from the earth. And so these trees will mine minerals. They pull these minerals up into their leaves. As these minerals come up into their leaves, if anybody has ever cooked with a cast iron skillet, uh, that skillet is full of iron. And if you allow it to oxidize with water, what color does the skillet turn? It begins to rust. That's the same color that the leaves begin to change because now they're full of minerals and they're beginning to oxidize, and the leaves are releasing their nitrogen.
Oh,
The
wait.
nitrogen, uh-huh.
I'm sorry, but I never put rusting together and that whole process together with what happens with the leaves
Hmm.
changing their color.
Right.
That's fascinating.
Right. The trees are preparing for a nutrient cycle in the fall, the same way that we should be doing with our gardening, with our garden. So the trees drop the leaves. The leaves are full of minerals. The leaves fall on the ground, they cover the soil, they cover the ground. As they decay, the microbes begin to break down this decaying matter to build more soil, but also to disperse nutrients into the soil for the next generation of crops. So, what trees are essentially doing are using their leaves as a mulch and as a compost that is right there for them. So, when you see leaves on the side of the road, take those bags of leaves, and you could take a lawnmower and just shred them up and put them in a big bin and just let them sit. And what you'll see is, if you let them sit by June, if you go to the bottom of that bin, you're going to see this beautiful matter leaf mold, what they call it. And it's just this beautiful light black soil that's going to be full of life. It's going to be full
Wow.
of life. And that mold you can then utilize to spread on your garden as a fertilizer, or you could just simply do it in place and spread just tons of leaves on top of your soil and let the microbes in your soil eat. Because if we look at gardening from growing soil versus growing plants, what we realize is that we always have to be engaged with the soil. And these microbes are living beings. They have to eat. They're just like you. They need food, they need water, they need air. And so the food that they eat is organic matter that is laid on top of the soil. So if you could just simply put shredded leaves on your garden beds, that is probably the most simple act and one of the best acts that you will see. And in the spring, when you start your plants, particularly if you start with plugs that you may grow indoors, you put those plugs directly into the soil and just move those leaves back, you're going to see a total change in your soil. Your
Wow.
soil will be loose, it'll be aerated, it's going to be full of earthworms, full of nematodes, full of all types of little small organisms. And that's what you want to see when you look at your soil. You never want to look at your soil and not see organisms there, because it's a barren area. You want to look at soil and see it full of life, and just simply
Wow.
putting leaves will do it.
Just simply putting and so now going back to the no-till, what you're saying is I take the leaves and literally just put it. I don't even have to dig it and till it and
No,
all of that.
no,
Just put
no.
it.
Yeah, just shred them up. You want to shred them up because if you
Okay.
don't shred up the leaves, they will create like a layer that'll stop water from getting to the soil.
Okay.
So you want to shred up your leaves. Uh, but once you shred them up, yeah, just simply lay them on your garden beds and let them sit there for the whole winter, spring. Um, my, I would say as you're growing throughout the year, you should never see your soil. You always want to keep a layer of mulch on your garden beds. And that mulch could be leaves. I think leaves is the best source of mulch because leaves are full of minerals and you want to always be mineralizing your plants. I always say it's very important for humans to remember that we cannot ingest minerals that do not come from a plant. We are predispositioned to literally for our nutrients to come from a plant-based source. So if you take an iron pill and you can take it, and if it's not plant-based, what's just going to happen is that when you go and urinate, you're going to see your urinate this urine this weird color, and it's all of the iron that came out. So because your body can't digest it, it has to be digested from a plant. It's like plants struggle to digest nutrients that wasn't already digested by a fungus.
Huh.
And so those are the reasons why we have to mulch because we have to keep the soil uh the soil life together and the microbial life, the fungal matter, all of those things, they only exist in soil that is not being mulched and soil that has some type of covering on it.
Wow. Okay. So leaves are so plentiful and there's so
Hmm.
many of them that
Hmm.
most of us can get those for free. Like you
Right.
just have to probably everybody can if they try because there
Yes.
are
Yes.
trees everywhere, even in the city.
Yes. Um, I would tell people to get 5 times more leaves than you think you need.
Okay.
Because what you're gonna see is in the cooler months, you'll put those leaves on your garden beds, and because it's cold, those microbes, although they're alive, they're not extremely active. The organisms in the soil, they're alive. Remember, they're cold-blooded beings. So they're not really active, but they are feeding just at a slow rate. But the moment that it heats up, you may have a foot of leaves sitting on top of your beds. But the moment that the soil temperature rises, that foot of leaves will be gone in a month because they would have consumed it. All of the organisms in the soil would have consumed their leaves. And the next thing you know, you go from this lush, dark, rich soil to you're looking at this hard, cracking stuff again. So you want to save enough leaves in this season to help you in the next season so you can continue to mulch your soil. So you could develop a fungally dominated soil. So this time of the year, the same way when you have an abundance of tomatoes and squash and okra, you are saving those for the season that you won't have it this time of the year. The same way that you're putting your herbs out and drying your herbs, your all of these different things that you're doing in the spring, your abundance that you have from that season, you're saving it for the next season that you know you won't have that abundance. So the abundance that we have this season are simply things like leaves. If you could have a big bin or save a few big bags of leaves just in the back of your yard or wherever you could store it at for June and July, where you won't have that matter anymore. And you could take those same leaves, spread it on top of your garden, and it'll continue to foster that life that you built this time of the year. So the
That
abundance of this season is soil building, and that's one of the things that you definitely should be doing this season. You should do it at all times, but if you're not gardening, really change your mindset to look at it as far as you are growing soil. You're growing soil. I love to say the secret is in the soil, and that is the secret to a successful garden.
so that's deep. The fact because I never thought about that, like that I'm growing soil.
Hmm. Hmm.
Wow. So
Right.
I think about all the times when we had the city come by and just pick up our leaves.
Hmm.
And then they tell you, oh, we're going to have food insecurity. Like they're preparing us mentally for
Mhm.
food insecurity, but we're living out of sync with nature.
Right, right, right. I think if you could project a thought and a concept long enough, people will embrace it and people will begin to function in a matter of that. So people will begin to act insecure and they will do
Mhm.
insecure things. And I
Mhm.
think it's what's that biblical verse that says, my people perish from a lack of knowledge. And so we have no idea that when we're putting our leaves out on a curve to be taken away, a lot of times these leaves are going to, and I can bear witness from managing a farm. Your leaves, your trees that are being mulched up and all of that stuff is going to nurseries and places of that nature, and we're taking that and we're composting it and we're changing it into something else. So by the time the springtime coming, you want to buy plants, we're just literally reselling you what you gave to us in the fall, because we're
Wow.
just composting it and changing it into another farm, and we are, expediting the process of it. So no, we don't have to suffer from food insecurity. That's that is definitely something that we could easily tackle, and it doesn't require us to have hundreds and hundreds of acres of land. The little farm that I farm on here, I'm in Baltimore, it's just an acre and a half of land. And this year, I don't know how many thousands of pounds we produced from just an acre and a half of land.
Wow.
So the notion that you need this huge piece of land to be productive is fictitious. The average neighborhood, I say if 10% of the population of America just dedicated to having a garden, we wouldn't even discuss food insecurity anymore.
So you said 10%?
Just 10%.
Just 10%?
Just 10%. Just
That
10%.
sounds doable to me. Like that 10%. That's 1
Yeah,
out of
just
10
10%.
people.
Yes, 1 out of 10 people, we wouldn't have this conversation. If 1 out of 10 people dedicated themselves to gardening and composting, so much of the carbon footprint that we see in the earth would begin to die. Another benefit of no-till gardening and what you do is when you put those leaves on the soil, is that these leaves and or whatever you're putting the organic matter, it actually sequesters carbon and locks that carbon into the soil. So tilling is a means of releasing carbon stores that has been in the ground for hundreds or thousands of years. So imagine people tilling the Amazon and it's never been tilled before, and how many tons of carbon that has been held under the soil. These plants recycle that carbon as a form of nutrients. But the
Mhm.
moment that you till the soil, we are releasing this carbon back into the atmosphere. So just simply by mulching your soil, what you will see in planting trees, what you'll see is that it will begin to sequester carbon back into the earth. Gardening is literally the most revolutionary act we could do as far as saving our earth. It
Wow.
really is.
Wow, gardening as a revolutionary act. That's a
Yes.
concept.
Yes. And I think we have to look at it that way. You know, as you previously mentioned, just the notion of food insecurity. Knowing that, with a few containers, uh, you could take one container and grow enough salad for your family just sitting on your balcony. You could grow microgreens on your kitchen counter. If you have a backyard, uh, in a backyard, a 10 by 20 space, you could definitely grow enough vegetables with the proper planting to grow for a family of four for a whole year.
What
Um,
so wait a minute, say that again? For a
I said
family
a
of
10 by
4?
20 space, if you have, with proper planning and design, you could grow enough vegetables for a family for a whole year
Really? I thought you
easily.
needed a whole lot more space than that to
No, no,
feed
no.
4 people.
That's why I say with proper design, if we take this season to build our soil and And another thing that we could do during this season, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back, as another thing we could do during this season is look at our design. So if you have limited growing space, um, and say you want to grow a watermelon is going to vine out, unless you got a sugar baby or something of that nature. That's a variety of watermelon. But if you have a watermelon is going to vine out, 16 feet. And it's
Hmm.
great. You can still have a watermelon, but instead of letting it vine out all over your yard, make a trellis to where you could grow it vertically.
Hmm.
If you want to eat beans and you love green beans or some type of bean variety, which are great not only, from a nutritional viewpoint, but beans are legumes. They put nitrogen back into the soil. Grow beans, grow pole beans. They grow vertically. So you could utilize your space the same way the city planners look at a city and say, hey, we don't have a bunch of land to make these houses that spread out wide. So we're going to throw them up in the air. So we could grow crops that go into the air. We could set up trellises. We have fences at our house. If you have a fence at your house, let your fence be a what I like to call a living fence. Plant crops that'll climb up on that fence. And your fence, instead of it just being there as a barrier, it could be there as a means for life to grow on. So I mean, you could crops that you could plant that will fence and vine out, whether it be beans or melons, cantaloupes, watermelons, squash, all of these different crops you could grow vertically, and the rest of your space you could utilize to grow other crops. And what we'll see, like I said, with squash, if you want squash or zucchini, three zucchini plants will produce all of the zucchini, I promise you, that you'll need for the year.
Wow.
You just got to figure out how to store it now. Yeah,
Right.
so it's this is very possible. We could have a true impact on our food security. Uh, Us growing our food can have a true impact on our household economies, and thus our the economies of our communities. And then gardening is a community. I always like to say, regardless of race or ethnicity, gardeners all have a commonality, and there's a rites of passage that the soil and gardening takes you through that makes people unite on that front as well.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Wow.
so we could definitely tackle many of our problems, and I personally believe that there may be a concerted effort to keep people from a place of being secure and self-sufficient, and having a mindset of doing for self, whether it be food, and of course we know food is medicine, and also food is energy. I like to tell gardeners and farmers that you shouldn't look at yourself any different than someone who's in the oil industry or who creates solar energy, because food is energy. If you are a gardener, if you are a farmer, you are in the energy business. That you are in the business of creating energy. And
Wow.
so we don't have we it's one and the same.
Right. That makes complete sense because without that energy, you can't really survive. And I
Right.
think right now in this day and time in a lot of places in the world, and this a lot of you guys watching from all over the world. So you may find it a little different. But here in the United States, a lot of us are taking for granted food, right? Because you go to a supermarket and you pick up your, whatever it is, nicely packaged, and you bring it home and you eat it and you think that's how you go out and get food.
Mhm.
But really, food production is a process, and it's
Mhm.
something that we should all I find it now that I'm thinking about it appalling that everything that goes into many of our mouths are coming from places we don't even know where it's coming from.
Right. Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah. Yeah, that's it's crazy and it's scary. It's very scary. We have no idea where the food came from. Um we have no idea how it was raised. We have no idea the nutrients that went into it. We have no idea the toxins that was sprayed onto the food. um, how they will affect us, just physically, how they will deal and affect our bodies chemically. How will they alter moods? How will they alter mind states? How they affect our hormones, and all of these different things that we see, these practices that we see in agriculture. Um, it's amazing to me that we take something so special, like you said, for granted. The
Right.
fact of knowing, your food is literally, the source of your body's energy. And that's from a holistic perspective, whether it be, mentally, physically, spiritually, psychologically. Food affects all components of our being. And we have been lulled into just going to a grocery store, getting something in a package, and
They make
just
the
going home
packages
and
look
cooking
so
it.
pretty too, don't they? In some cases,
Yeah, yeah,
especially
they
if you're
do. I
buying
mean,
organic
yeah, yeah,
organic food, right? The
yeah,
package looks all
yeah.
natural and stuff,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. I mean, it's agriculture, the agriculture industry, there are psychologists just for the agricultural energy in industry
Really?
to appease people and to make people think that this food looks good and this is how we should eat it. And from a perspective of one who grows, I think my mindset may be a little bit different, when I see the packaged food,
Right.
because I don't look at it in the same capacity. And I think what happens is when people start growing food, that mindset changes as well, because now now you
Right.
know what food is supposed to look like. Now you know that all apples don't look the same.
Uh,
Hence 80% of agricultural products are thrown into landfills because they don't look the way. So even when we talk about food security, I just want to go back to that point again. 80% of produce that is grown is thrown into landfills.
oh, really?
80%. And the reason
80%?
why the reason why, yes, the reason why is that the food does not look the way that consumers have been told that foods should look. So even at
Wow.
my farm, we throw away. Well, I can't we don't throw it away. I like to, the farmers get frustrated when we have, food that may have a hole in it. Say we're packaging up kale and some insects got a hole to it and it has holes in it. And we don't throw it away. We recompost it and it'll feed the next cycle. But the vast majority of food that is grown in America is thrown away. 80% is thrown into landfills. And so when we look at this massive amount of food insecurity, once again, that just, destroys the notion of food insecurity. No, we produce enough food to literally, America produces enough food, they believe that America could almost feed the world. But the vast majority of the produce that we grow is either grown, put into landfills, or it is grown to feed animals.
Wow. Wow. So, no, so this blows my mind. 80%. That's
Yes.
a lot.
That's some of the higher estimates. But yes, 80% is a lot. It's
Because
a
we're
huge
taught
percentage.
because we're taught that food is supposed to look this special little way,
Right.
right? Like
Right.
this perfect apple
Right.
when that's not really reality.
It's not
Because we're
reality.
and it makes sense because we're all different,
Right.
right? We come in all sizes, shapes, and colors. Why wouldn't
Right.
our food
Right.
come? Why
Right.
wouldn't food be growing out the ground like that?
Right.
Wow.
And I always tell people if they want to see the way that food looks, go to a indigenous market, go to an Asian market. And you'll go to there and you'll see carrots that are fat, short, long, skinny, got have blemishes, and all of these different things. All of these different variations denote the genetic variants of this plant. Just the same way with people, the variations
Right.
of people denote the different genetic variants in us. And that genetic diversity is, those are the seeds of life that keep life continuing.
Wow. Wow, this I mean, well, every time I talk to you though, like you blow you just blow my
Yeah.
mind. because like I said, I grew up in New York City, and a lot of that stuff,
Mhm.
I think most people though, we've gotten away from the earth.
Right,
So it's
right.
people like you that can help bring us
Mhm.
back home to where we need to be. And that's growing our own food,
Right,
you
right,
know?
right, right.
So just to kind of come towards a conclusion because we're running out of time, but I just want to
Mhm.
make sure that the audience takes away what they could be doing right now in
Right,
December
in
to
December.
get ready for their
Right.
to be preparing to grow their soil.
Right. So right now in December, once again, mulching your soil is a major thing that you should be doing. You could use leaves, straw, grass clippings, any organic matter as a form of mulch. If you're using leaves, make sure that they're chopped up. Composting, establishing composting systems for your garden is definitely something that that you should be doing right now. And if you are looking to start a garden this time of the year, and you have a barren piece of land, the easiest thing that you could do to have your land prepared is just to put a big tarp over that area and let that tarp make sure the tarp is being held down, put some sandbags or something on it to keep the tarp on the ground. But what that tarp, after it sits there for about 3 or 4 months, is going to kill all of the grass and the weeds that live under it. And so now when you set up your garden, you're setting up your garden for a weed free area. So that's something you could do if you're trying to start a new space, or even if if you have a previously existing garden. If your garden is sort of dead now, and you're not doing anything, but you had a major weed problem. Remember, do not till your soil, because when you till your soil, all of the dormant weed seeds they pop up. So don't till
Mm,
your soil. Just put leaves, mulch on top of your soil, compost on top of your soil. If you guys get, I keep saying on top of the soil. Everything on top of the soil. You don't have to mix anything in your soil. The soil is designed to break everything down. The organisms, they're already there. So just simply mulching your soil um, is one of the most radical things you can do to get your soil prepared. If you garden last year and you have a problem with weeds, like I said, put a tarp over that soil. Uh, a canvas tarp will be good, but just a regular, I don't vinyl tarp, just to put that over your soil and let it sit there for a few months. Let it sit there until April. What you'll see is that almost all of the weeds under that soil will be dead, and that
hmm.
will resolve a weed problem in your garden. If it's a previously existing weed problem, and like I said, if you want to start another garden, another great thing that you could do is look into vermiculture. Vermiculture is composting with worms. Worms are a great way, and particularly if you don't have a lot of space. So, say you stay in an apartment and you don't have a large yard space, or your house, you don't have a large yard space. You could look at to vermiculture, make creating bins for earthworms, and a lot of the stuff I'm telling you guys. If you on YouTube, I have videos on my YouTube channel, the Black Urban Gardening Society. I have videos on how to do these things already, but you could create a worm bin. Vermicomposting is super duper great because the nutrients that comes from the earthworms is hundreds of times more dense than what you would just get from simply composting. So you can set up a vermicompost bin in your house. Some people even do it under their kitchen sinks, and just your
Really?
food scraps. Yes, just your food scraps.
But do the
You
worms
can
get
throw
out?
them. No, they won't get out. They won't. The only way they'll get out is if you have created an environment that is so toxic that they need to escape to live. But other than that,
Okay,
if you love to eat, why would you leave a buffet? You know, and the
that's
worms
true.
love to eat. So if you keep the buffet going for them, but if you do vermicomposting, remember worms hate any plants from the allium family. So they don't want any onions, any garlic, and they don't like citrus either. And
Okay.
that'll burn their skin. So keep those things out of your worm bin. But if you set that up, you are setting yourself up for a huge amount of nutrients in your garden for the future, just by using worm castings. So composting, mulching, mulching, mulching again. I'm gonna keep saying mulching. Uh, and setting up different worm systems, your vermicompost system is a great thing to do. Clearing land space, your growing space, is a great practice that you can engage in right now. And another
Mhm.
thing that you should be doing now is definitely planning and orchestrating how you want your garden to look. Take some time in the winter and look at your backyard or wherever you're growing at and see where the sun is falling at. See where the sun shines, particularly if you're a new gardener. If you have a tree and you want to put a garden somewhere and the tree has no leaves on it now, but if you could see the shadows of the branches of that tree in their growing area, what that's telling you is that when the sun is shining in the spring, uh, that growing area, you're not going to get any light, because imagine what you see now with no leaves, imagine it with leaves.
Right.
So, really be calculated with planning your garden space, be calculated with what you want to grow. Do not become overwhelmed with the crazy variety of crops out here. And do all of the crazy stuff. Uh grow what you eat. Grow what you eat. But another important thing that you could be doing now, and this is not necessarily for preparing soil, but for preparing a long-term food system, is to plant fruit trees. Plant fruit trees right now. You want to plant them while they're dormant, and so that's another thing you can be doing now as well.
Okay. All right. Wow. So this was a lot and a lot of really good information. You will come back, right?
Yeah,
You
definitely.
will
If you
come
invite
back.
me back, for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because what I want to do is I want to have a just do this as a series. Like
Mm-hmm.
right now it's winter, so we're talking about what we should be doing now, but I
Mm-hmm.
know that's going to change as the time goes by, cuz you
Right.
basically as a farmer, you have pretty much a year-round um calendar, right? Like you're
Oh yeah.
always thinking about
Yeah.
what your next move is, always planning,
Yeah.
right?
I always tell people that as a farmer, I'm always thinking a season ahead.
Uh-huh.
So in the summertime, I'm already thinking about the fall and the winter. So yeah, my mindset now is really the spring, the spring and summer right now. That's where my mind is at. Yes.
Oh, okay. All right,
Yeah.
great. Do you buy fertilizer?
We will buy fertilizer if it's needed. But I will
Okay.
say, if you buy fertilizer, buy an organic fertilizer. OMRI is a great certification, the OMRI certification.
Mhm.
That's a high standard of certification for organic fertilizer. There are, some basic brands you could get from like box stores, Home Depot, Lowe's, Walmart, whatever. Dr. Earth is a good variety. I'm not sponsored by any of these people, y'all. It just works. Dr. Earth is a good variety. Nature's Bounty is a good variety, but really look for organically certified fertilizer. Um, and then use those applications as needed. Um, Another great thing that you could look for is, if you could get it, is green sand. Green sand mineralizes your soil, and remember, the human body is primarily composed of minerals, and plants don't produce them. But if you add the minerals to your soil and you don't turn your soil, the microbial life will make those minerals accessible for your plants to eat. And when you eat your plants, you'll get the minerals in return.
Nice, nice. So, Ibrafall, tell the audience where they can find you.
Sure. Our website is www.blackurbangardeningsociety, and social media, Facebook is the same thing, the Black Urban Gardening Society, Instagram, Black Urban Gardening Society, and our YouTube channel as well as the Black Urban Gardening Society.
Okay, I'll be linking those in on the show notes as well, guys, so you
Excellent.
guys can find him because his YouTube channel is great. Like you want to go watch all the videos, so much good information up there, and he'll be back. You'll be back,
God
right?
willing, yes. God willing.
Yes. So thank you so much for
All
coming.
right,
I
thank you for having me.
appreciate you. I definitely appreciate you being here and sharing with the audience. And guys, please find him, go look him up, send him messages. Go. You're also on Facebook, right?
Yes, Facebook as well, Black Urban Gardening Society. And we also have a Facebook group. It's called the Black Urban Gardening Society as well. Small group. We have about 11,000 members, but it's a group of Black gardeners globally that sort of support group. Uh, we encourage and support each other in what we're doing. And also, you guys stay up. April 16th, we'll be celebrating International Black Gardeners Day, which is something we've started 4 years ago. This will be the fifth year. Sumayyah last year lit us up with a great lecture during International Black Gardeners Day. So that was a great thing. So we'll be doing it again this year. So you guys stay up on that. We love to have people come out, participate. We will have workshops. We'll have how-to um, sessions, and then we will also have a celebration as well.
Fabulous. So, everybody, please show him your love, show him your support, let him know that you've gotten information today that helped. And thank you again for coming.
Thank you for having me.
My challenge for you today is no matter what your living situation, even if you're in a small apartment, pick something, any little thing that you can grow and produce for yourself. Some examples are parsley, rosemary, basil, oregano. They grow easy. Pick something. If you're already growing your own, plan to expand your garden this year. Maybe even start a small farm. I promise you, no matter where you are in your journey, you will not regret producing something for yourself. Tune in next week for more great conversation and feel free to email questions and comments to wyv@protonmail.com. I'm Sumayyah Simone, and thank you for watching What's Your View?